On behalf of Flows to Bay, welcome to everyone who's joining us today. We're excited to discuss these important topics with all of you. So thanks for letting us be part of your Friday. All right, so a little bit about Flows to Bay and why we encourage families to be a watershed hero. So Flows to Bay is the San Mateo countywide water pollution prevention program. So it's a bit long of a title, so that's why we really say Flows to Bay, but that's what our program is called. And it was established to reduce and prevent pollution carried by stormwater into local creeks, our bay, and ocean. So what we do, the program aims to educate the community and really do what we can to prevent stormwater pollution. This includes working with residents, businesses, and schools, and really getting the word out about watershed protection. And we have our friend, Ollie the Otter, who will be dropping by during the presentation to let us know important things about where Ollie lives. So with that, what is a watershed? I've said that word a couple times now, but we are going to find out what that means. So a watershed is the land that water flows over or through on its way to a water body. And we use the term water body to describe any body of water. And for our purposes in San Mateo County, that refers to creeks, the bay or ocean. And so this watershed is essentially a funnel, and it takes water that falls on the land and carries that to those larger waterways. And every single person in the world lives in a watershed, and everything that happens in the watershed affects water quality and habitat quality for fish, birds, and other living things, like us humans, for example. So, does San Mateo County have any watersheds? Submit your guess into the chat, and I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. Yes, it does. In fact, like I said, everyone in the world lives in a watershed. So we do have watersheds in San Mateo County. How many do you think we have? Submit your guess into the chat, and then we'll find out how many watersheds San Mateo County has. I'll give you a couple more seconds. All right. We have 34 watersheds. And there's certain areas in San Mateo County that those watersheds cover. So this is a map where you can see the names of those watersheds on the left and then where that's located in San Mateo County. And on our website, that's where you could find this map. It's interactive. You could scroll through the watersheds on the left. You could zoom in, move around. So that's where you can find out what watershed you live in. All right, so why are we talking about watersheds and how does that impact you at home? So when we developed towns and cities, we built infrastructure. And infrastructure can mean many different things, and it can be referred to as roads, buildings, and public spaces. So while we developed this infrastructure, we were also trying to preserve as much natural habitat as possible. But unintended consequences of this infrastructure is stormwater pollution. So when it rains, this water runs off roofs, driveways, and other surfaces into the street. So this rain will land on grass, trees, roads, and sidewalks. And when it hits the grass, that rain goes into the ground. But when it hits other things like sidewalks, roads, and buildings, the rain runs into the street and becomes what we call stormwater. And that stormwater runs down the street and into storm drains, which then flows into our waterways. So some of these things we have to look out for entering into our storm drain system is pollutants that include oil leaking from the car, pesticides from the garden, dog waste that's not picked up, and fertilizers from lawns. Now, you may be thinking that water from your house, like your toilet and faucets, have some type of cleaning system with the water that's used. And you're right about that. That's referred to as being part of the sewer system. And San Mateo County has a separate sewer and storm drain system. So that means that the water that flows down into storm drains goes directly into our water bodies untreated. And I mean untreated as in like not cleaned through. Whereas your internal plumbing in your home, the toilets, the faucets, that gets piped through a wastewater treatment plant. And that water is treated or cleaned. And there are places out there that have a combined drainage system. And actually, our neighbors in San Francisco do. But again, in San Mateo County, we have those separate systems. So, because we have those separate systems, we really care about not causing stormwater pollution. So, let's take a closer look at some of the pollutants that we listed prior. So, this depicts how stormwater pollution can occur. So while you may put trash in the trash can, if it is not bagged and wrapped tightly, then it can easily fall out and end up on the floor and in our storm drains. Now, when you wash a car, the water can cause all the harmful chemicals you use, so different like soaps and solvents, to flow into a storm drain and ultimately end up in our waterways. So that's kind of how they build on each other, is those images. And the next image depicts how trash that enters a storm drain near your home can end up in our local creek. So that's that middle picture, which can carry that trash all the way to the ocean. So that's the right picture. So the trash that enters your community can end up miles away, which affects a completely different community. So that's why we're talking about the impact of our actions, and it really travels far, and it could impact someone who weren't making those actions. But interestingly, not all things that are found in a storm drain were directly thrown into it or placed into it. And there are other ways that litter can enter a storm drain. Litter can enter storm drains from rain, or when you turn on the sprinklers or irrigation system, or even when it's windy, things can just like fly into the storm drain. So to recap, rain, sprinklers, and wind can cause items to flow into a storm drain. And runoff is the term that's referred to when we talk about sprinklers and irrigation. And that runoff will also get into the storm drain system. In fact, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, polluted runoff is one of the greatest threats to clean water in the US. So, why is it important that litter and other stormwater pollution doesn't go into our waterways? Well, for one, animals can confuse it for food, which they eat, and as you see, it can make them very sick. And plastic takes months and even years to break down into smaller pieces. And once it's broken down into these smaller pieces, it can easily be eaten by animals that live in our creeks, the bay, and ocean. And when there's so many little pieces out there, it makes that much more likely for those animals to be eating those little pieces. And interestingly, us humans will eat these smaller pieces because these animals, like fish, often end up on our plates. So when these end up on our plates, we can get sick from eating them because we eat the plastics or chemicals that these animals had eaten. And then we can get really sick too, which we don't want to happen, and we don't want the animals in these waterways to get sick either. So to recap, when you don't throw trash in the bin correctly, it can end up in our storm drain, which carries the litter into our water systems, which then can make animals that live in waterways sick. and can eventually make humans sick because we would eat those animals. And I know there's folks out there who don't eat fish or other animals that are in those waterways, but you can still be impacted by this. Then that's because a lot of folks in San Mateo County also like to go boating or swimming in these waters, like when you're at the beach. And if the water is too polluted, it becomes unsafe to take part in any of these fun activities. And we don't want that to happen. And speaking of activities, let's do an activity together. All right. How long would it take for trash to be broken down in our water systems, like creeks, the bay, and ocean? Put your guesses in the chat, and I'll just pause for y'all. Okay, and remember, this is what breaking down means. There's a lot, it's a process. There's a lot of small pieces that it gets broken into. So I'll give you a hint. Plastic bags take 10 to 20 years to break down in the ocean. So how long do you think it would take a soda can to break down? You can put your guess in the chat, and I'll pause for all of you to put in your guesses. Okay, so it takes 80 to 100 years, which is a very, very long time. So the next question is, what about a plastic bottle? How long do you think it takes for that to be broken down? And you can submit your guess in the chat. Okay. 450 years. This is getting to be a lot. What do you think about a fruit peel? You can put your guess in the chat for how long you think it takes to break down in the ocean. Okay. 2 to 5 weeks. And what about balloons? How long do you think it would take for that to break down in the ocean? Six months to 4 years. All right, so now that we know how long it takes, we really want to make sure we can do what we can for those items to not get into our waterways. So now let's go into solutions. What can you, your family, and friends do to prevent stormwater pollution? You can all do your part by picking up litter. And remember to keep safety in mind. You're in a place where you might be picking up someone else's trash. So as folks in the left photo they have gloves on. And now we have so much PP around, I'm sure you'll be able to find some disposable gloves. So yeah, keep safety in mind. And when you have that litter, make sure it gets sorted correctly. So your plastic bottles, soda cans, and paper can go into the recycling bin. Leaves or branches go into the green waste, which is also referred to as yard waste. Unless you have a compost bin, then you can put those in the compost bin. And most other items like bagged dog waste and candy wrappers go into the garbage. So speaking of dog waste, this is also an important action that folks can do. And it's important because 1 small gram of dog waste contains 23 million fecal bacteria, which can harm the health of our creeks, oceans, all the animals that are in those waterways, and us. And the longer dog waste stays on the ground, the greater the chance for soil and water contamination too. So be sure to pick up those droppings promptly and not allow it to sit in there to have those effects. And this applies not only to your backyard, but in parks and along trails. And if you are on those walks with your dog, don't forget to throw the bag into the garbage can, because leaving those bags or on trails or in parks is considered littering and is subject to fines. So Now let's move into the garden. Commonly used pesticides have been detected in creeks and waterways throughout California and around the country. Pesticides can cause problems for our health and the environment, even when applied according to the label directions that are on the pesticide. And that's because very small amounts of pesticides can be deadly to marine life, birds, and other life forms. And in some locations, water contaminated with pesticides can move from creeks and surface waters into drinking water wells. So you or your family should avoid using pesticides to take care of pests in your garden and instead opt for environmentally friendly actions, which is part of an approach called integrated pest management. And there's many different practices you can do that are considered with integrated pest management. And we have a lot of information on our website about those types of actions. And related to the yard, there are many water-wise choices you can make. And before going into how it helps prevent stormwater pollution, let's think about the fact that we are facing drought conditions. So these actions I'm going to list right now are also ways in which you could be helping your community not have such an impact with the drought. So these items can conserve water, lower your water bill, and they do help prevent stormwater pollution. So these various actions, which we do have more information on our website, it could be adding drought tolerant landscaping, native plants, mulch, rain barrels, rain gardens. We have a lot of ideas. And our website does have these choices you can make. And some of these actions actually have rebates that are available. So those pages also list those rebates as well. And what's an interesting action is that you can prevent trash from even becoming litter if you create less of it. So one of these actions is reusing bottles and by refilling your bottles from the water fountain instead of purchasing any new plastic bottles. And if you have old plastic bottles lying around, you can always recycle them or repurpose them for a fun science or art project. And by picking up trash and creating less trash in your school, your home, and in your neighborhood, you can help keep your local watersheds clean and healthy. And we have many more ideas that families can do at home and in the community to prevent stormwater pollution. So check those out on our website. We have a lot of different actions and information for you. So thank you, Watershed Heroes, and thank you for attending our webinar today and learning so much with us.